Good day, everybody. Today we are going to be covering how you create and set up data sets as it relates to programming by weld size. So what you'll see here is I'm working in this software called WorkVisual. I'm not going to get into a lot of details about WorkVisual as a software package other than to show you how we use it to create parameter sets in a robot. As you'll see here, this is the robot that we'll be working on, and underneath controller components we have the Lincoln i400. Any welding machine that you have hooked up will appear here for you to be able to set up and configure. So with the Lincoln i400 opened up, we have the ArcTech editor, and we want to select the option for parameter sets. Parameter sets are important because they are how we create our parameter sets around our weld size, like 2.5 millimeters. So let's look at how we add a new parameter set into our list. If I select or click on the plus button, it actually creates at the bottom a new parameter set. It gives me the default name of set 1, which I can then change to be whatever I want it to be. And it picks these default values for a minimum, for a default, and a maximum value for our wire feed, our arc length, our dynamic, and any other option that the power supply might give us. Okay, I will go through in a minute where we set up these defaults that it automatically puts in here. Now what is important to understand is as we develop weld parameters for the various weld sizes like 3.6 millimeters, and there are multiple joint configurations like laps, fillets, and butt joints, you may develop different welding parameters for each one of those joint configurations. So we could label this not just 3.6 millimeters, but 3.6 millimeter horizontal lap joint, for instance. And then once we develop the parameters to weld a 3.6 millimeter horizontal lap, we will then make that value the default, whatever wire feed rate we determine as being the proper wire feed rate to make a 3.6 millimeter horizontal lap, and we will put a minimum and a maximum. So the minimum and the maximum is where you set the window the operator has to change the wire feed from the default value that you select. Now it's important for process control, and the whole purpose of programming by weld size is that we close that window very, very tight around the wire feed speed we determine produces this size of weld. Same goes for arc length, and the same will go for dynamic. What you're seeing here is the ignition parameters. What I'm going to demonstrate to you right now is how you would delete a data set out. I'm going to delete this 3.6 that I just created out by simply going remove set with the negative button here. And now it's gone. I can move from ignition parameters to welding parameters, and in doing so everything really is the same, 2.5 all the way down to the 3.5. However, we have some important additions to our data set. The main important difference is the robot speed is now added to the data set. So we can set a robot speed and fix it so that the speed of the robot is fixed to the weld size. So you can actually create data sets that are 2.5 millimeter horizontal lap, 40 inches a minute, or 50 inches a minute, or 20 inches a minute. That is the main difference between the welding parameters and the ignition and crater fill parameters. The crater fill parameters are very close to the ignition parameters with the addition of crater time and post flow. Now, what is important to understand in addition to creating parameter sets is what we allow the operator to have access to on the teach pennant. And what I mean by that is if we move over to this parameter definition, we can define some of the global settings around the parameter sets. What I mean by that is we click this tab, assignment, and we have the wire feed rate, the arc length, and the dynamic all available here to us. And you see here we have ignition parameters, welding parameters, and crater fill parameters. This is important because if these are selected like they are right now on the teach pennant of the robot tech or the weld tech will see and be able to change the wire feed rate, the arc length, and the dynamic within the window that we created in the parameter set, the min and the maximum around the default. If we unselect these, then the operator will not be able to see the wire feed rate, the arc length, or the dynamic in the ignition parameters, the welding parameters, and the crater fill parameters. And so all they will see in the drop-down menu when they go to put a weld in is the name of the data set, 2.5, 2.6, 2.7. The data set will contain this information, but they will not have access to make any changes to it. This is how you can get very tight process control over what a robot or a weld tech is allowed to change.